Last Tuesday, my mother-in-law stood on the steps of her country club in Greenwich, Connecticut, and told the valet not to let me inside, because, and I quote, "the cleaning lady doesn't use the front entrance." She said this in front of 30 members, including 2 state senators, while my 7-year-old son Noah stood right beside me holding my hand. What she didn't know was that I had $620 million in a trust account under my name, that I owned the building she was standing in front of through a holding company, and that in exactly 6 days, I would destroy everything she'd spent 40 years building. My name is Maya Reeves. I'm 31 years old, and for the past 4 years, I've worked the night shift as a housekeeper at the Langford, one of Manhattan's most exclusive residential towers on the Upper East Side. I scrub marble floors and clean penthouse bathrooms from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., 5 nights a week, for $3,200 a month. And I've done this while hiding the largest unclaimed inheritance in New York State history. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I married Grant Aldridge 7 years ago. We met at Columbia, where I was finishing my MBA and he was coasting through his final year on his family's last name. The Aldridges owned Aldridge and Partners, one of the oldest wealth management firms on the East Coast, with $4 billion in assets under management. Grant's father, Charles Aldridge, had built it from a small advisory shop into a Wall Street institution, and his mother, Vivian, had turned their social standing into an empire of its own charity boards, museum galas, the Greenwich social circuit. When Grant brought me home for the first time, Vivian looked at my off-the-rack dress, my public school education, and my lack of a family trust fund, and decided I was a temporary inconvenience. She told her bridge club I was Grant's little project. During our wedding, she wore black. For the first 3 years, I played the game. I organized their charity auctions, managed their holiday parties, smiled through every comment about my modest background. But when Grant and I divorced 4 years ago, everything changed. The divorce was ugly. Grant had been unfaithful, but Charles's lawyers made sure I walked away with almost nothing. Joint custody of Noah, a used Subaru, and $1,500 a month in child support that arrived late more often than not. No alimony. The prenup Charles had insisted on saw to that. When I took the housekeeping job at the Langford to make ends meet, the Aldridges didn't just distance themselves. They weaponized it. Vivian started telling people at Noah's school, Whitmore Academy in Greenwich, that I had substance issues and that's why I cleaned buildings at night. She told the other parents I was unstable. She told Noah's teacher that she was concerned about the home environment. None of it was true, not one word. But when a woman in a $15,000 Chanel suit says these things at a $52,000 a year private school, people believe her. The inheritance came from my grandmother, Evelyn Chen. She'd emigrated from Taiwan in 1962 with nothing, built a small electronics repair shop in Queens, and over 40 years turned it into Pacific Ridge Technologies, one of the largest semiconductor suppliers in North America. When she died in 2019, the company was valued at $1.4 billion. She left everything to me, her only grandchild, through a trust that wouldn't fully activate until I turned 30. My parents had both passed my father from cancer when I was 12. My mother in a car accident during my sophomore year at Columbia. Grandma Evelyn was all I had, and she'd structured the inheritance carefully. No public announcement, no press release. A private trust managed by her longtime attorney, Sandra Park, at a boutique firm in Midtown. The day I turned 30, Sandra called me into her office and slid a folder across her desk. After taxes, distributions, and existing investments, you're looking at approximately $620 million in liquid and semi-liquid assets, she said. The Pacific Ridge Board has been running the company independently, but you now hold controlling interest. What would you like to do? I thought about it for exactly 4 seconds. Nothing, I said. Not yet. Sandra raised an eyebrow. You want to keep cleaning bathrooms? I want to keep knowing who people really are, I told her. My son is growing up surrounded by people who judge worth by net worth. I need to know who's real before I change anything. Sandra studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Your grandmother said you'd say something like that. She told me to give you this. She handed me a sealed envelope in my grandmother's handwriting. Inside was a single sentence. The mop sees what the throne never will. Be patient, little one. So I kept working. I kept cleaning. I kept driving my 12-year-old Subaru to drop Noah at school, where Vivian's Mercedes was always parked in the front row. And I watched. For 2 years, I watched the Aldridges show me exactly who they were. The first incident that truly broke something in me happened at Noah's school play last October. He was playing the lead in the second-grade production of The Giving Tree. He'd rehearsed for weeks, standing on our apartment's tiny balcony, reciting his lines to the pigeons. I arrived straight from my shift, still in my work clothes because I hadn't had time to change. I'd washed my hands 5 times, but there was still a faint smell of cleaning solution. I sat in the back row. Vivian was in the front, of course, with Charles beside her and Grant looking uncomfortable at the end. When Noah spotted me from the stage, his whole face lit up. He waved. "Mom, you came." Every head in the auditorium turned. I saw the recognition, the quick glances at my uniform, the whispered conversations behind programs. After the show, Noah ran to me first. "You were amazing, baby," I said, lifting him up. "The best tree I've ever seen." Vivian appeared behind us. "Noah, darling, come take photos with grandmother. The professional photographer is waiting." She looked at me the way you'd look at a stain on a white couch. "Perhaps you could wait in the parking lot," she said quietly. "The photographer charges by the hour, and we don't need." She trailed off, but the meaning was clear. They didn't need the housekeeper in the family photos. Noah's arms tightened around my neck. "I want Mom in the picture." Vivian's smile didn't waver. "Sweetheart, Mommy has to get back to work. Cleaning doesn't do itself." She laughed lightly, and 2 nearby mothers laughed with her. I put Noah down, kissed his forehead, and walked to the parking lot. I sat in my Subaru for 20 minutes, hands shaking on the steering wheel, reminding myself why I was doing this. That night, Sandra texted me. "You okay?" I replied, "Not yet. But they're not done showing me." And they weren't done. Not by a long shot. The custody motion arrived 3 months later, in January. Charles's law firm, because of course he used his own firm's legal team, filed for modified custody on Grant's behalf. The argument was simple and devastating. They claimed Noah's primary residential environment was inadequate. They cited my 1-bedroom apartment in Astoria, my night shift schedule, my income level. They had statements from Vivian about my supposed instability. They even had a private investigator's report documenting my comings and goings, noting that I left Noah with a babysitter 5 nights a week while I worked. The filing requested full custody for Grant, with supervised visitation for me on alternating weekends. I read it sitting on the floor of my apartment while Noah slept 10 feet away. They wanted to take my son. Not because Grant was a better parent, he saw Noah maybe twice a month, and usually pawned him off on Vivian. But because they could. Because they had the money and the lawyers and the social standing, and I had a mop. What they didn't know was that Sandra Park had already connected me with Rebecca Torres, one of the most aggressive family law attorneys in New York. Rebecca had taken one look at the filing and laughed. "They're going to regret this," she said. "But we need to be strategic. Let them think they're winning." So I let them think they were winning. I showed up to the preliminary hearing in my best Target dress, while Charles's attorneys arrived in a fleet of black Escalades. The judge, a stern woman named Patricia Huang, looked at both sides and scheduled a full hearing for March. 4 months away. 4 months of them believing they'd already won. But the custody play was a distraction from something much worse. In February, Sandra's forensic accountants discovered what Charles had been doing with Noah's trust. My grandmother, before she died, had established a $4 million education trust for any future great-grandchildren. When Noah was born, he became the sole beneficiary. Charles, as the court-appointed trustee after my divorce, a role he'd lobbied for claiming I was financially illiterate, had systematically drained it. $2. $8 million gone. transferred through a web of shell companies back to Aldridge and Partners, which was hemorrhaging clients after a series of bad investments Charles had hidden from his own board. The remaining $1.2 million was scheduled to be wired to an account in Zurich in 3 weeks, timed to coincide with a major deal Charles was pitching to a sovereign wealth fund from Abu Dhabi. He needed the books to look clean. He was stealing from a 7-year-old to cover his own failures. My grandmother's money, set aside for my son's future, funneled into a dying firm to maintain the illusion of success. When Sandra showed me the forensic report, I was so angry my vision blurred. "We have everything," Sandra said. Bank records, forged signatures on the transfer documents, email chains between Charles and his CFO discussing how to restructure the trust. This is federal wire fraud, minimum. The SEC and FBI Financial Crimes Unit are already aware. They've been watching Aldridge and Partners for months on unrelated complaints. This gives them the case they need. I stared at the documents spread across her conference table. Evidence of a grandfather robbing his own grandson. "When?" I asked. "The Wellington Foundation Gala," Sandra said. "March 15th. Charles is receiving their Philanthropist of the Year award. Every major player in New York finance will be there. The Abu Dhabi delegation will be there. And Judge Huang, who's handling your custody case, is on the Wellington board." She paused. "Maximum impact. Maximum witnesses. I want the FBI ready to move that night," I said. "And I want the donation announced before the arrest. If we're going to do this, Noah's name goes on a children's wing, not a court filing." Sandra smiled for the first time in our conversation. "Your grandmother would be proud." The weeks leading up to the gala were the hardest of my life. I had to keep pretending. Keep cleaning. Keep smiling when Vivian made her comments. Keep watching Noah struggle. He'd started having nightmares. He'd wake up screaming that grandmother said you're going away, and I'd hold him in our tiny apartment, rocking him back and forth, promising that I wasn't going anywhere. His grades slipped. His teacher called me, concerned. Noah told a classmate that his mom might have to leave, and his grandmother is going to be his new mom, she said carefully. "Is everything okay at home?" "Everything is fine," I said, though my jaw ached from clenching. "We're working through some family issues." The teacher paused. "Mrs. Reeves, for what it's worth, Noah talks about you constantly. How you read to him every night, how you make pancakes shaped like dinosaurs, how you're the strongest person he knows. Whatever the Aldridges are saying, the staff here sees a different story." I hung up and cried for an hour. Then I called Sandra. "Move the timeline up. I want everything ready, 2 weeks early." "Done," she said. "And Maya, bring something nice to wear. I'm thinking Valentino." Grant showed up unannounced at my apartment on March 1st. Noah was at school. Grant looked terrible unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, his usually perfect hair greasy and flat. "I need to talk to you," he said from my doorway. "Then talk." He sat on my second-hand couch and put his head in his hands. "Dad's in trouble," he said. "The firm is bleeding money. He's been hiding losses for 2 years, moving money around, borrowing from client accounts." "I know about Noah's trust," I said quietly. Grant looked up, startled. "How?" "I have a good lawyer." His face crumbled. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know until last month. I found the transfer documents in his office. Maya, he took almost $3 million from our son. Why are you telling me this?" "Because I've been recording him. For 6 weeks. Every conversation. Every admission." He pulled out a flash drive. "It's all here. Him telling Mom about the trust transfers. Him coaching the CFO on how to falsify the audit. Him laughing about how you'd never find out because," and these are his exact words, "she can barely read a balance sheet, let alone a forensic audit." I took the flash drive. "And the custody motion?" "His idea. He wants Noah under his roof so he can control the trust completely. If I have full custody, he becomes the permanent trustee with no oversight." "Maya, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for all of it. For the divorce, for letting them treat you this way, for being too weak to stop any of it. Why now, Grant? Because Noah asked me something last week. He asked me if I loved him more than I was scared of Grandpa. And I couldn't answer. A 7-year-old asked me that, and I couldn't answer. Grant left the flash drive and walked out. At the door, he turned back. Whatever you're planning, I want to help. I'll testify. I'll give you everything. Just protect our son. That night, I added Grant's recordings to Sandra's evidence file. The case was now airtight. March 15th. The Wellington Foundation Gala at the Pierre Hotel. 800 guests, black tie. The biggest names in New York philanthropy, finance, and politics gathered under crystal chandeliers to celebrate generosity and civic virtue. Charles Aldridge was seated at the head table, his tuxedo impeccable, his smile practiced, ready to accept an award for being a great humanitarian. The irony was so thick you could choke on it. I arrived in a midnight black Valentino gown that Sandra had insisted on. My hair was professionally done for the first time in 4 years. Diamond earrings that had been my grandmother's. When my car pulled up a Rolls-Royce Phantom that Sandra had arranged, the valets actually stumbled over each other. The doorman opened the door, and I stepped out into a wall of camera flashes. The press was there for Charles's award. They had no idea what they were actually about to witness. Security checked my invitation and froze. WJ Foundation, CEO, M. Reeves. The WJ Foundation, my grandmother's initials, Wanjun had been anonymously funding programs across New York for 2 years. Homeless shelters, children's hospitals, after-school programs in underserved neighborhoods. The foundation had donated $80 million without ever revealing its founder. Every nonprofit in the city had been trying to identify the mysterious benefactor. Half the people in this room had sent letters begging for meetings. I walked through the lobby and nearly collided with Vivian, who was holding court near the bar. She saw me and her face went through 5 emotions in 2 seconds. Confusion, recognition, disgust, alarm, and then a forced smile. "Maya," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "What an unexpected surprise. Are you working the event tonight? The catering staff entrance is around back." I smiled. "I'm a guest tonight, Vivian." She scanned my gown, my jewelry, my professionally styled appearance, and something flickered behind her eyes. Fear. Before she could respond, the Wellington Foundation's director appeared at my elbow. "Miss Reeves, we're so honored you could attend. Your table is right up front, next to the mayor's." Vivian's champagne glass tilted dangerously in her hand. Charles noticed the commotion from across the room. I watched his expression shift from curiosity to confusion, to something approaching panic, as he saw the foundation director escorting me to a seat that was, by any measure, more prominent than his. The dinner proceeded with agonizing normalcy. 3 courses, small talk, a jazz quartet. Charles kept glancing at me, trying to figure out the puzzle. I made pleasant conversation with the mayor, with a Times columnist, with the head of the Abu Dhabi Sovereign Wealth Fund, who mentioned he was very much looking forward to finalizing a partnership with Aldridge and Partners this week. I smiled and said nothing. At 9 p.m., the Wellington Foundation director took the stage. "Before we present tonight's Philanthropist of the Year award," she announced, "we have a very special presentation. This evening, the Wellington Foundation has received the largest single donation in our 50-year history." The room went quiet. Charles straightened in his chair, a half-smile forming. He'd been angling for this kind of recognition for years. $60 million, the director continued, and the half-smile froze on Charles's face, because his pledge had been $5 million to fund the Evelyn Chen Children's Center, a new pediatric mental health facility that will serve over 10,000 children annually. The screens around the ballroom lit up with architectural renderings of a beautiful building. I saw Noah's face in the promotional materials I'd given permission months ago. "Please welcome the founder of the WJ Foundation and tonight's extraordinary benefactor, Miss Maya Reeves." The silence lasted 3 full seconds. Then the room erupted. I stood and walked to the stage, passing Charles's table. His face had gone white, Vivian was gripping the tablecloth so hard her knuckles matched it. Grant, seated at the far end, closed his eyes and exhaled like a man who'd been holding his breath for years. "Thank you," I said into the microphone. My voice was steady. I'd practiced this in my bathroom mirror 100 times. Most of you know me, or think you do. For the past 4 years, I've worked as a housekeeper at the Langford on the Upper East Side. I've cleaned your offices, your lobbies, your bathrooms. Some of you have walked past me without a second glance. A few of you have been genuinely kind. 2 years ago, I received an inheritance from my grandmother, Evelyn Chen, who built Pacific Ridge Technologies from a repair shop in Queens into a billion-dollar company. After taxes, the inheritance totaled $620 million. I looked directly at Charles. I kept working because I wanted my son to learn that dignity comes from character, not from bank accounts. And I wanted to see how people treated someone they believed had nothing to offer them. The room was absolutely silent. I continued. But tonight isn't about me. It's about accountability. I invited my attorney, Sandra Park, to join me on stage. Sandra walked up carrying a leather folder that contained the end of the Aldridge empire. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sandra said, her voice commanding the room, "I represent Miss Reeves and her son, Noah Aldridge Reeves. What I am about to share involves federal financial crimes that have been referred to the FBI and SEC. The screens changed. Bank statements, transfer records, forged signatures, a timeline of theft stretching back 22 months. Charles Aldridge, as court-appointed trustee of Noah's $4 million education trust, has embezzled $2.8 million. These funds, established by Noah's great-grandmother Evelyn Chen, were systematically siphoned to cover losses at Aldridge and Partners." The gasps were audible. Phones appeared everywhere. The Abu Dhabi delegation was already conferring in urgent whispers. The remaining $1.2 million was scheduled for transfer to a Swiss account within days, Sandra continued. "We have bank records, forged documents, internal communications, and recorded admissions. The FBI Financial Crimes Unit has been notified, and warrants have been issued." Charles stood up so fast his chair toppled. "This is slander. I will sue every person in this, Dad. Sit down." Grant's voice cut through the chaos. He stood at his table, pale but resolute. "I have 6 weeks of recordings. Every conversation, every admission, every time you laughed about stealing from your own grandson. I'm testifying." Charles stared at his son like he was seeing a stranger. "You ungrateful." The head of the Abu Dhabi fund stood and buttoned his jacket. "Mr. Aldridge, our discussions are terminated effective immediately. We do not partner with individuals under federal investigation." He nodded to me respectfully and walked out with his entire delegation. A $400 million deal, gone in 10 seconds. I stepped back to the microphone. "One more thing," I said. I looked out at the room, the same world that had dismissed me, pitied me, laughed at Vivian's jokes about the cleaning lady. This morning, my mother-in-law told a valet I wasn't allowed through the front entrance of the Greenwich Country Club because, and she said this in front of my son, "The cleaning lady doesn't use the front door." I paused. As of this afternoon, the WJ Foundation acquired a controlling interest in that club's property. So I suppose I'll be using whichever entrance I like. Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. Vivian looked like she might pass out. 2 FBI agents who'd been waiting quietly near the exits moved toward Charles's table. "Mr. Aldridge, we'd like to speak with you. It's in your interest to come voluntarily." Rebecca Torres, my family attorney, appeared with court documents. "Judge Huang signed emergency orders 1 hour ago. Full custody of Noah to Miss Reeves, effective immediately. Restraining orders preventing Charles or Vivian Aldridge from contact with Noah pending criminal proceedings. And a full freeze on Aldridge and Partners accounts until the forensic audit is complete." Charles was escorted out without handcuffs. He went quietly in the end, which surprised me. Vivian did not go quietly. She screamed. She called me a fraud, a gold digger, An ungrateful nothing. Security had to guide her out through a service entrance. The cleaning lady's entrance, someone muttered, and the whole room heard it. The aftermath was swift. By midnight, the story was everywhere. Number cleaning lady billionaire trended for 3 days straight. The video of my speech, filmed by at least 50 guests, hit 20 million views in 24 hours. The New York Post ran it above the fold. She scrubbed their floors. She owned their world. CNN, NBC, every major outlet picked it up. Aldridge and Partners' remaining clients pulled $1.2 billion in assets within a week. The firm collapsed. 14 employees who'd known about the fraud were terminated. Those who'd been kept in the dark were offered positions at competing firms, with reference letters from Sandra's office. Charles was indicted on 21 federal counts. Wire fraud, embezzlement, money laundering, breach of fiduciary duty, and securities fraud related to the hidden losses at his firm. He pled guilty to 12 counts in exchange for cooperation. The sentence: 14 years in federal prison. Vivian lost everything that had defined her. Every charity board, every club membership, every friendship that had been built on status rather than substance. She moved to a small rental in New Jersey. The woman who'd worn black to my wedding now wore the same 3 outfits on rotation. I didn't feel sorry for her. I felt nothing. Grant testified fully. After the trial, he asked to meet at a diner in Queens, not far from where my grandmother's repair shop had been. I want to be a real father, he said. Not the kind who shows up twice a month and hands him off to the nanny. The kind who makes dinosaur pancakes. You don't know how to make dinosaur pancakes, I said. Then teach me, he replied. We agreed on a new custody arrangement. Joint, but real this time. Grant started therapy. He got a job at a nonprofit, entry level, nothing to do with his family name. He showed up for every school event, every soccer game, every parent-teacher conference. He was trying, genuinely trying, and that mattered. Noah bloomed. We moved into a brownstone in Brooklyn, nice but not flashy. He started at a new school where nobody knew the Aldridge name and nobody cared. On his first day, his teacher asked each student to share something about their family. My mom cleans buildings and helps kids, Noah said. She's the strongest person I know. He started a lemonade stand that donated proceeds to children's shelters. It raised $847 in the first month. He was 7. When a classmate asked if his mom was the famous cleaning lady from the news, Noah shrugged. She's not famous, he said. She's just my mom. That's better. I kept working at the Langford for 3 more months after the gala. Not because I needed to, but because I needed to finish something. On my last night, my coworkers threw a party in the supply room. 40 night shift workers crowded around a sheet cake that said "Our Boss Lady" in blue frosting. Marco, who'd shared his lunch with me every Tuesday for 4 years, gave a toast. Maya never acted like she was better than us, he said. Even when she literally was the richest person in the building. She covered our shifts when we were sick. She fought with management when they cut our break time. She remembered every birthday, every kid's name, every anniversary, and she did it all while hiding $620 million. He paused. I'm still mad she never picked up the check at lunch, though. I laughed until I cried. Then I made my announcement. I'd purchased the Langford through the WJ Foundation. Effective immediately, every service worker in the building would receive a 60% raise, full health insurance, paid family leave, and profit sharing. The room went silent. Then Marco dropped his cake. I used $200 million to endow the Evelyn Chen Foundation permanently. Pediatric mental health services, scholarships for children of essential workers, job training programs, and legal aid for parents fighting unjust custody battles. The foundation's motto, taken from my grandmother's note. The mop sees what the throne never will. The Greenwich Country Club was converted into a community center, offering free after-school programs, tutoring, and meals for local families. The first family to use the new facility was a single mother who worked 2 cleaning jobs. She walked through the front entrance. Noah asked me once why I'd hidden the money for so long. Because Grandma Evelyn taught me something, I told him. She said you can learn more about a person in 1 hour when they think you're nobody than in a lifetime when they think you're somebody. The Aldridges thought I was nobody, and they showed me everything. He thought about this for a while, the way 7-year-olds do, with total seriousness. Then he said, "Mom, can we still make dinosaur pancakes even though we're rich?" "Every single morning, baby. Every single morning. Money doesn't change who you are. It just gives everyone else permission to show you who they've always been." The Aldridges taught me that, just not the way they intended. If this story meant something to you, please subscribe to Messed Up Family Revenge and hit that notification bell. Share this with someone who needs to hear that your job title doesn't define your worth. And comment below. Have you ever been underestimated by someone who didn't know your full story? I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, remember, respect isn't something you earn with a bank account. It's something you give, because it's right. And the people who can't do that, eventually, the world finds out.